Welcome to The F Word, a podcast series that examines, excavates, unpicks and reframes forgiveness through the lives of others. I'm Marina Cantacuzino, a journalist from London, founder of the Forgiveness Project charity, and I've built my career investigating how those who face the most complex and devastating things in life find a way through. I'll be talking fortnightly to a guest who's experienced something very difficult or traumatic in their life, but who rather than respond with hate or bitterness has embraced, or at the very least considered, forgiveness as a response to pain. So today I'm talking to Lis Cashin, and unlike all the other episodes of the F Word podcast, this is the first time that I haven't actually met my guests before, because all the other episodes in this series are conversations with people I've worked with over the years around telling and sharing their story. So Liss, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I wonder if perhaps we can begin, well, let's start at the beginning, shall we?
It starts very early, I think. My parents divorced when I was just 18 months. Then my mum was a single parent. Then she remarried when I was 6. And it became apparent over the next few years that this guy was quite emotionally abusive and was drinking a lot. So my home life wasn't really a stable place to be. And so I started already to internalise what that meant about me from that early stage. So I wasn't good enough, I wasn't lovable, I needed to try harder, there was something wrong with me. All of these sort of foundational beliefs were being sown. And then I passed 11 plus, went off to grammar school. And yeah, because I was not really in a very robust state of mind, obviously I was a target then for other girls, so I was bullied a little bit because I did very well in exams. I was then picked on for that, and so I started already trying to sort of diminish myself a little bit, not to try and stay under the radar at home, try and stay under the radar at school.
So Liss went on to tell me how she coped with the bullying by putting everything into sport, because this was something she was really good at. She joined the netball team, she played tennis, she loved athletics. But really it was the javelin that she excelled in, and it gave her the recognition she was looking for. So when she was 13, she was picked for the school team to throw the javelin. And that year on sports day, she was incredibly excited because there was a real possibility she might win a medal.
And that morning, I clearly remember it was a really blue skies. It was in July the 15th, 1983. And I went to school really quite excited that day, looking forward to the day. I remember the registration in the beginning of the day when our form teacher was asking anyone who wasn't taking part if they would volunteer. One of my friends who'd volunteered, Sammy, I know that she was called into the headmistress at lunchtime. And I don't know what was said, but I know that she was quite upset as a result of whatever that conversation was. And then we went off into the afternoon. I did long jump, high jump, did okay, but I wasn't really expecting to get the medal there. And then it was the javelin event. And Sammy, my friend, and a couple of other friends had been put into the field to mark the javelin throw. So they were just 13 themselves, as was I. And when my name was called, I went, there's like a white box that you take your throw, and then there's 2 white lines that come out onto the field. And if your throw lands within there, it's a valid throw, and if it goes outside, it's not. And one of my friends had just gone off to get an ice cream, and so Sammy had just stepped in, as well as another girl, Sarah, and they were both standing just by the white line to the right of me. So I did as I was told, waited for my name, took my run up and threw the javelin as hard as I could because I really wanted that medal. And at first it was going straight, and then it was just at the last minute it just veered off to the right, almost as if the wind had taken it, although I was told later there wasn't any wind, but that's how it's looked. And Sammy was distracted for some reason, maybe from the earlier conversation or I don't know what, but she wasn't looking. And there was this moment of horror, realising it was heading towards her.
Did you cry out?
We all screamed her name. Well, no, I did, and a few others. And she just turned. And so there was a moment of relief when I thought, oh God, she's seen it. And then the moment of real horror when it saw it strike her in the head, just above her left eye. And
oh, goodness.
She stumbled forwards, there was a lot of blood, and the shock for me was just so overwhelming. I just literally collapsed onto my knees. I had my head in my hands. I just remember saying, oh my God. I couldn't process it. It was just
you
too
knew
much.
It was
I knew it was
serious
serious
injury.
I thought I'd blinded her.
Yes.
And of course that was bad at that point, because as a 13-year-old, something so horrific and feeling so responsible, even though I knew I'd just done what I'd been told to do, on another level, it left my hand and it hit her. And so I just blamed myself completely for that.
What happened then? What was the immediate response of the school? And
yeah, well, I remember really just wanting to go and get help, and we were quite far from the school building, and there was no mobiles in those days. And so I just remember really wanting to run for help. What actually happened, apparently, was that I was just running around in circles on the field in shock until somebody realised that actually I needed some help as well. And so I was taken inside, and everyone kept telling me it was going to be okay. And I knew it wasn't okay. I was shaking quite violently. My mum was a teacher in another school, and they rang her and said I'd been involved in an accident, but it wasn't serious. And so she asked for me to go on the phone, which I did. And she said then she realised something was wrong because I just wasn't saying anything.
total shock.
Total shock, yeah. I was sent home. Mum came home, found me upstairs. I was just shaking so violently. And I just said to Mum, can we go and see her? I just had this overriding need to tell her I was sorry.
Yes.
And that I didn't mean it. And so Mum said, yeah. So I was wrapped in a duvet because I was so shaking. And the lady on reception, when we told her who we were, she said, I'm sorry, she's been transferred to the neurological hospital. And I really knew then.
Yes.
So Mum went off to find a doctor, and I was left on my own in A&E. And then Mum came back, and we went outside, and there was like a plastic chair just by the exit. And I sat down, and I said to her, is she going to die? And Mum said, yes, I think so. And then that was, everything just collapsed really for me. I think, it was so defining in that moment. Nothing could ever be the same.
Did you have love and support around you?
My mum and my sister loved me very much. Obviously, my stepdad, it was very different. On the way back from the funeral, he said, we're never to mention her name in our house again.
So you went to the funeral? Were you invited? I mean, how did the parents?
The parents were incredible. I mean, compassion on a whole different scale, right from the beginning. They never blamed me.
Did they tell you so much?
Yeah. No.
Early on,
right from the beginning. Wouldn't let my name be in the press.
Wow.
Yeah. Wanted to see me. But of course, for me, the feelings of guilt were just so much. I just kept thinking, I've killed your daughter.
Did it help having their compassion? Or would
it did
their
later
fury
on
have been better in some weird way?
I don't know, actually. I know many, many years later when I really started to unpack it all, I was so grateful for their compassion. And I don't know if I'd still be here alive without that, because I think that would have been a whole different story.
Well, that makes sense, because you were unable to be gentle to yourself, and they somehow are extraordinary people.
Extraordinary, yeah.
It could be, I imagine, that they thought it could have been the other way around.
That's
it might
exactly
have been
what
their
they said.
daughter throwing the javelin.
It's exactly what they said, and apparently I didn't go to the inquest later that year because the police thought I would be in the media and everything, but I never got to hear other people's versions until much later. But apparently there was another parent there that said we shouldn't be here. They were saying that my daughter shouldn't have been involved in this. Another girl who witnessed what had happened, and they said it in front of Sammy's parents, who said it could have been the other way around. They were saying it could easily have been any one of us the other way around. I'm so grateful.
So rewinding a bit, you mentioned that your stepfather had said you shouldn't mention Sammy's name.
Yes.
Do you think he was doing that to protect you and the family? Because I can see what a deeply unhelpful thing it would actually be.
Knowing the bigger scenario, I don't think so. I think he didn't want the attention on me.
And therefore on him.
And therefore, yeah.
It's not helpful, is it, to go into a place of silence?
It was, no, and there wasn't even counselling back then. In fact, the GP said it didn't even need to go on my medical record. I was asked, did I want to see a psychiatrist? And as a 13-year-old, I thought, they think I'm mad. And then I'll never be able to get a job. And so I said no. and then felt that I had to try and pretend that I was okay. And, I think I'm so resilient to be here because I think I just split off that part of me in order to keep functioning, but I never really felt fully alive. I was like kind of straddling like some sort of zombie for a long time.
Did your sister and mother also go into this place of silence, not talking about Sammy or what had happened?
My sister was only just a bit older than me, so she was very loving and supportive, but the guilt I felt, I wouldn't have talked about it with her. I did try and talk to Mum sometimes, but she would say, wait until your stepdad's gone out. So I got really angry with my mum because I wanted to talk to her then.
When Liss talks about her stepfather telling her to never mention the name of Sammy again, it really reminds me of another Forgiveness Project story, that of Kelly Connor. Similar in many ways, Kelly was 17 when she accidentally ran over an elderly woman and killed her. When I spoke to Kelly, she told me about how her mother's way of dealing with what had happened was to lay down the edict that they would never talk about it again, so that for nearly 2 decades she didn't speak about the accident at all. Like Liss, she too was easily forgiven by the family of the person she killed. And like Liss, she discovered over the years that while silence may defend and protect you for a while, in the end it will only serve to isolate and immobilise you.
So I'd just go into my room and lock myself in, and I used to write letters to Sammy. I used to ask her questions about... I used to ask her... Sorry.
It's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
Going back there.
Just things I didn't know about her that I would have liked to have known. Had she ever kissed a boy?
Yes.
Was she happy? I don't know, just lots of different things really. And also then just telling her, how sorry I was. And I knew obviously I'd never post those letters, but in a way they gave me great comfort, even though I didn't get the answers.
That's really interesting. And you thought to do that yourself, because there's plenty of research to show that writing down feelings around trauma can be very helpful and build resilience and help people cope with the aftermath of something very traumatic. But it was just instinctive for you. It wasn't like you thought this might help.
No, I think because I used to love to write anyway. And so for me, I think it was probably a natural thing just to write my feelings. And it was only much later when I eventually went for some professional help that they said how great that had been for me to express it in some way. Because I was told that all the teachers were keeping an eye on me, but nobody was talking to me. And so I felt like I was in some sort of goldfish bowl. It was horrendous. So it was just almost amplifying the guilt that I was feeling.
Yeah, I think we've learned a lot since then.
Yeah.
How to help children through things like this.
Oh, I think now you'd probably get a whole army of counsellors for the school.
The school probably had to go to the inquest as well, did they? Were they reprimanded?
They were, and their version of events was very different to mine and the girls'. And I never got to read that until I was much older. But they'd very clearly been told what to say by lawyers, I think.
Yes, typical.
Typical, but yes, it was death by misadventure. And that meant it could have been prevented and the school had responsibility. The 13-year-old girl should never have been on the field in the first place marking a javelin throw.
Yes.
But I never thought I'd be able to let go of this guilt and blame because it left my hand and it hit her. And I never thought I'd ever be able to change that feeling. But
you have?
Yeah.
How have you? I mean, did it take years?
It's taken many years. In fact, it was just 4 years ago, and I'm now 50, that I started to speak about my story, and I found I was being re-traumatised in doing so.
When you said speak about it, publicly or to friends?
Publicly.
Because you felt the need to talk?
Yeah, because I had learned an awful lot up to that point, things that had helped me, more in a more holistic sense, a lot of it. But I just wanted to share those learnings, I think. So I started to speak, but then was being re-traumatised. And I thought, well, this can't be right. It can't be so painful for me, even if it's helping other people. There must be another level I can get to. So I went to my GP and I'd read a book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Yes, I know.
And the first chapter was about a soldier with PTSD. And I thought, it was like it was me.
Just in case you're interested, The Body Keeps the Score. It's subtitled Brain, Mind and Body in the Healing of Trauma. And it's by Bessel van der Kolk, who's one of the world's leading experts on trauma. It's probably the most respected book published in recent years on PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. You'd never thought about PTSD before?
No. I'd heard it, but not really understood it. And I just felt like I could have written the chapter. So all these things that I'd been living in chaos internally for many years, although looking outwardly competent, people who know me, I had no idea, I managed to hide it so well, but it was exhausting for me and, had a lot of destructive impact on my mental well-being. But so I went and asked for an assessment of PTSD, and my GP actually apologised on behalf of the medical profession. He said, "I'm so sorry, nobody's thought to do this before." Yes. That really meant a lot to me.
Yes.
And then I had some trauma CBT, compassionate focused, which was very painful, but because I had to relive the whole experience, but really helped me to shift. And I realised that underneath everything, I really believed I was evil and that I deserved to be punished. And what I got to re-experience was actually that I was just an innocent 13-year-old going to school. And then she'd just done what she was told. And something devastating had happened.
So did you find the adult Liss was able to forgive the 13-year-old child?
Definitely. It was almost like my heart was breaking for myself because I've been holding on to all of this blame and guilt and, punishing myself, self-sabotaging all that time in so many different ways. And then suddenly I thought, God, actually, I had a right to be safe at school that day. I wasn't messing about. There was nothing I did wrong. And yet, Sammy was dead. And actually, I realised the school had a responsibility.
So does that mean that the self-compassion that you found for yourself meant that the blame shifted from yourself to the school?
I think rather than blame, because I'd done so much processing by then, it was more a responsibility. So I was angry at first with the school. I think that was a natural reaction. I just had it too late. So I had some anger thinking, this was so preventable. Why did this happen? And then amazingly how life works. But in my work over the years, I ended up in lead safeguarding roles. And so I realised how even with the best will in the world, sometimes things happen. Fortunately, that they didn't happen on my watch because I was so good at it because I was mitigating all the risks, but it could have. And I thought, the teachers weren't malicious, the school wasn't willfully neglectful, it was an accident. And, there were things they could have done and there was a responsibility around that, but I don't blame them. Yeah. So it was like a compassion for myself, a forgiveness for myself, and then also for them.
Did you use the word forgiveness? Did forgiveness come into your mind, or was it about compassion and empathy for yourself? A gentle way of dealing with the trauma, finally.
Yeah, I think it started with forgiveness and then it became compassion. Yeah.
And what does forgiveness mean to you?
I think forgiveness was when I thought I'd done something wrong. And so then I forgave myself for that, realising that I was a child who hadn't meant it. But then another level was compassion, realising that actually there was in a way nothing to even forgive myself for. That was the level that I progressed to, was just actually, just real love and compassion for the child, me on the school field that day.
Did you have people sort of saying, the realisation you came to finally, it was an accident? We all make mistakes. Did people try and tell you that, but you just were unable to listen?
Yeah. From the beginning, I think people said it was just an accident, but I was, with no help to process that. I just thought, you don't know what you're talking about. It left my hand and she's dead and that's it. There's no way you can tell me anything other. The police interviewed me after she died, and I remember one of them saying, "Had you argued with her that morning?" And I thought, oh my gosh, they think I've done it on purpose. And when I did get to read the inquest notes much later with my statement, it just said, I didn't mean it. It was like I was just trying to,
It's quite extraordinary to think that they could have asked you that.
Yeah.
Must have been blatantly obvious that this was just an awful accident that could have happened to any child that day.
I thought I was going to prison. I thought, this is it. I'm going to prison. I'm going to be punished. And, I'd grown up in a Catholic environment, and thou shalt not kill. It doesn't say it's okay if it was an accident. It just says thou shalt not kill. And so I thought, oh God, it actually, in a way, perversely saved my life, because I didn't feel I could take my life, because there would be retribution in the afterworld. And so I was stuck in a way, just living in hell. It didn't need to die to go to hell. I was just created it.
And that kind of frozen state is very much about PTSD, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't move on, you can't flee, you're stuck.
I felt like I was in some sort of glass box, just completely disconnected for many years. I've never been married. It's impacted me in many different ways.
Was that a conscious thing, not being married or maybe not having children?
I unfortunately recreated the pattern with my stepdad in relationships for a long time, and so thought I'd just rather be on my own. But with children, I think I would have just been so worried all the time. It wouldn't have been good for the child or for me. I think it wouldn't have been a positive thing. But I love children. I have children in my life, but I don't think it would have been healthy to have had children myself.
Now that you've been able to find compassion for yourself, self-forgiveness, have you had any people frown upon that in any way, telling you that you've been too soft on yourself?
Not really. I think there was only when it actually happened, my sister was walking down the street and somebody shouted murderer to her. I've never had it to me, and nobody's ever publicly blamed me in any way. Sammy's parents, they never blamed me. I actually saw Sammy's mum last year after a long, long time.
Did you?
I did.
And how did that come about?
I published a book last year, This Is Me, about my journey, because I really wanted to share what I've learned to help other people. And so I had a lot of press. I was in the media, and that really kind of got a bit out of my control. And I didn't want them to think that I'd been paid for any of these things, or, I just wanted to make sure that they were okay, really. And so I reached out, and it was really one of the most beautiful, moving experiences. It was just me and Sammy's mum. And
what does she say? How has she been over the years?
Well, it has been incredibly difficult, because for the whole family, Sammy's sister and brothers and father who's now passed away, grandparents, cousins, all of them. And of course, I was really only realising the impact of that as an adult. But, they've all struggled, I think, not blaming me.
Were they supportive, or the family supportive of your book?
Yeah, in fact, I got permission before I even wrote it.
Right.
I would never want to do anything that wasn't okay with them, because they were so amazing with me. But one of the most moving things last year was that Sammy's mum, because I said I'd written the book in Sammy's honour, because, I really wanted to do that. And she said, I think you need to live your life for you now.
Yeah, so touching.
Really moving.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like a release somehow.
And it really made a difference. Yeah. Was it like permission that you could be?
Yeah. And I said it was almost like I felt on some level that I'd been waiting for that, unconsciously. And she said, that's all I've ever wanted. I mean, incredible.
One thing I've noticed from talking to a lot of people about their experiences and stories relating to forgiveness, it's usually forgiving others. It seems self-forgiveness is harder.
Yeah.
Do you understand exactly why that would be?
That's really interesting. Why?
We're hard on ourselves.
Very. Because I can more easily forgive other people for things that have happened than I could for myself.
Guilt is a huge cloud that hangs over us.
So destructive and so unnecessary. I think in the light of awareness, with different perceptions, you can always see the different sides to everything. That's been my journey. And so I can forgive other people because I may not understand their journey, but I know that how painful it has been on my own journey, and, how there was so much going on for me that other people didn't know about.
Yeah, and I sometimes think that self-forgiveness is really self-compassion. It's about accepting
Yeah.
that good people do bad things, that bad things happen to good people, that life is morally complicated, and that we are doing our best, basically.
I think so. And also, I think, we're living in this perfectionist society, and I think I've always been holding myself to that perfectionist ideal, so ashamed of all the things that were really going on inside for me. I wonder if that's why it was also very hard to forgive myself, because I felt like I had some sort of ideal that I should be a certain way because everybody else is. Of course they're not, I know now, but yeah, maybe that's part of it.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. And that's part of what I want to challenge the stigma and break all these perceptions around mental health. We've all got mental health and we've all got struggles, and we really need to be talking more about it. I felt like I was this kind of split personality, and instead of this integrated whole, and like you said, acceptance has been key for my recovery.
So the last 4 years, you've really grown into being yourself.
Yeah. And it's an onward journey, Again, I think that's the thing. I'm not holding myself to any sort of perfectionist ideal anymore, but I have more good days than I have bad days now. And
that's really good to hear.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps that's a good place to bring the conversation to a close. I just want to thank you so much, Liss, for coming in to the Forgiveness Project and talking to me.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for listening to the F Word podcast. To dig a bit deeper around some of the themes we've talked about, do check out the show notes by going to theforgivenessproject.com/FwordPodcast. And from there you can also explore the Forgiveness Project website, which over the years has collected and shared many more stories of how people have transformed the darkest of situations. I also want to invite you to join the F Word Podcast Facebook group, especially if you have more to discuss or share. Again, to find the link, go to theforgivenessproject.com/FwordPodcast. And finally, all these podcasts have grown out of years of trying to shift the narrative of our time away from one of hate and division towards empathy and understanding. So if you've enjoyed this podcast, please do consider donating even just the smallest amount to help us continue our work. All details of how to do this, again, are on the show notes page of our website. But most of all, I hope you'll join me again. Next time on the F Word podcast, I'll be talking to Paul Kohler, a British academic brutally attacked in his own home in London in 2014. It's a story that asks, can restorative justice help victims like Paul? And where does forgiveness fit in?